You go from being on such a high and so excited and so pumped, you're thinking the next day you could be pregnant, to you lose everything. I mean, it was very, very traumatic for us. Really traumatic.
Gretchen Rossi and Slade Smiley were hours away from an embryo transfer and potentially starting their family when, in the middle of the night, they got an unexpected call from their doctor. There would be no transfer. All of their embryos had arrested, which meant they were not viable. Gretchen and Slade were left with a decision. Was this it? Or would they be able to pick up the pieces and try again? I'm Lissa Klein, and this is Infertility. Today's story includes many different themes, and yes, one of them is loss. But this isn't a story about loss. Not really. It's a story about perseverance, unity, and finding the strength to carry on in order to achieve a goal as fundamental and important as bringing new life into the world. You might feel like you know Gretchen and Slade. They've opened their life to public consumption for years now. They were on the Real Housewives of Orange County. Gretchen is the CEO and creative director of Gretchen Christine International, an emerging lifestyle brand. And Slade is an actor and producer and CEO of Grayson Entertainment. Recently, they opened up about their struggles to start their family together. And today we are going to explore those struggles with them. I'm the Director of Member Services at Progeny, the leading fertility benefits company, and I hosted the very first episode of this podcast. In my role at Progeny, I oversee a team of amazing patient care advocates who help our members to not only access the care they need, but also to understand the treatments, emotions, and hurdles that they will face along the way. Gretchen and Slade had quite a few hurdles to navigate, but sitting down and talking to them, you might never know it.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing. Come in, Gretchen. Over.
Testing. Slade Smiley.
Woodchuck the Gray Squirrel. Come in, Gray Squirrel.
We're headed to outer space with crazy man Slade Smiley.
Thanks for tuning in. It's Radio Slade right here on Playlist 92.7.
He used to do radio. Can you tell?
Putting this in.
You should.
So Slade and I met about 18 years ago in the real estate business, and then about 10 years ago we found ourselves in a position where we could actually date each other because we were available. and we fell madly in love 10 years ago.
A business appointment brought us back together, and in the midst of that business appointment, it was very awkward for the other dude because I was so busy checking out Gretchen, I had no idea what that cat was saying.
It was interesting because through my 30s, I was very focused on my career. And then I remember at about 34 is when I first started talking to Slade about the fact that I really wanted to start having babies. Well, then, of course, life happens. And then before I knew it, I was 36.
It's no secret that the age of a woman's eggs plays a major role in fertility. And while 36 years of age isn't really old, the studies show that fertility starts a steep decline in many women after the age of 35. But for Gretchen and Slade, it wasn't as easy as deciding to start trying.
When I was 19 years old, I had my first son, and 10 years later, I had my second. His mother at that time was very high risk. We had unfortunately had 5 different miscarries, and it was a very tumultuous relationship without the miscarries. So you can imagine there was just a lot of tension in the relationship, and we were at the point of really just ending it. And she ended up pregnant like a 6th time. Ended up on bed rest, and it was still a very challenging thing to go through because that child ended up having brain cancer. So we struggle with his cancer on a daily basis. That being said, the challenges from it were that if his mother were to become pregnant again, they thought it could be life-threatening. There was no way, they said, that she could possibly get pregnant again because if she did, it could be very dangerous. So it was at that time that I elected to have my vasectomy. Not knowing, flash forward, that, Gretchen and I would be wanting to have children.
We live our lives day by day. And while we all like to think we have a plan and that we know what is coming next, it can sometimes be really hard to foresee where life will take you. Slade's vasectomy, which is a procedure whereby a surgeon cuts and seals both vas deferens to prevent sperm from reaching the seminal fluid during ejaculation, was an effective form of birth control for someone who felt there were very few safe alternative options.
I will readily admit there was no forethought.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to end this relationship at some point and I'm out of here and I want to have more kids somewhere else. You're so engrossed with just keeping up with the day-to-day, But then to complicate matters with now this life-threatening medical condition, and you're just trying to hang in there for work. You're just trying to hang in there to, do what you can to be with your son. Because, at that time I was told he maybe would make it 2 years.
Yeah.
So there was no forethought. I just thought, medically, I have to do this. We obviously can't risk the potential of getting pregnant again. It's dangerous to her. It would make no sense. We've got our son's, health at this point that's at risk. No forethought.
And here they were, years later, wanting to start a family. The good news is they had some options. A vasectomy doesn't remove a man's ability to create sperm. It just keeps the sperm from reaching the seminal fluid. They could do a vasectomy reversal, or they could aspirate the sperm from the testicle and proceed to do IVF. It's an individualized and personal decision. Gretchen and Slade elected to go with IVF.
We retrieved 19 eggs, so that was very exciting. And then they called us 2 days after that and said 14 fertilized, and they're looking great.
Quick IVF 101 for any of those who are unfamiliar. In vitro fertilization, or IVF, is the process of extracting a woman's eggs, fertilizing them with sperm in vitro, or out of the body, to create embryos, and then transferring an embryo into the woman. And 2 weeks later, you hope to have a positive pregnancy test. So Gretchen and Slade got 19 eggs, which were fertilized to form 14 embryos. Those are great numbers. But embryo formation is a very complex thing. To help us break down a little more about embryo development, we sat down with Dr. Mark Suri. He is co-founder and medical director of Southern California Reproductive Center and a leader in the field of fertility and reproductive medicine, including reproductive surgery and in vitro fertilization.
When you look at embryo development to the point where they can actually be tested, those are only the embryos that can cause a pregnancy. Most embryos don't divide to that level of maturity and normalcy. And the reason they don't range from these genetic issues that may be monosomies, where there's one instead of two, may be a combination of different abnormalities at different places. May also have to do with what we call the oxygenation of the cytoplasm of the embryo. That's one that we're just beginning to learn how to assess and measure. But we do know that there's an inverse ratio between the percent of normal embryo development and chronologic age.
So it is very much expected that with IVF, you start with a certain number of eggs. Then a smaller number of embryos develop. Fewer still make it to the blastocyst stage, or a mature level where they can be tested. When tested, even fewer will be deemed normal, and then you are left with a smaller number than you started. But generally speaking, 14 embryos is a really good start.
And they called us every day to tell us what was happening. Like, the eggs look great, oh my gosh, they're doing so good, da da da. So you can imagine that for us, getting that news every day, we don't know anything different, and we just think that it's going great. And right up to the day that we were going to implant, and it was, I was going in for surgery at 6 a.m., and the doctor called at 11:30 that night. He just says, I don't know how to tell you this. Unfortunately, every single one of your embryos is arrested. And I was like, what does arrested mean? And he's like, they basically have died. It was like a double whammy, because you certainly didn't expect to hear that all of them died. And you go from being on such a high and so excited and so pumped, you're thinking the next day you could be pregnant, to you lose everything. I mean, it was very, very traumatic for us. Really traumatic. And I was sitting right here at the bottom of the stairs when I got the call, and I literally fell to the floor. And I was like in a fetal position, just crying.
To have someone call up, to us, you have embryos that are developing. There's life there. And when someone calls and tells you you've just lost 14, 14. It's just a horrific feeling.
Something that I found is that when people suffer this kind of a loss of embryos, or for others who have a chemical pregnancy, which is a really early miscarriage, they feel especially lonely and isolated. If you haven't been through it, you might not understand this kind of pain. You might think it's unlike a death or any other kind of traumatic loss. But to those going through it, the pain is unmistakable, and the sense of loss is so very real.
I found myself many nights secretly crying in my bed and crying myself to sleep. I mean, it still brings up emotions for me, but, it's just like, because you just sit there and you think, gosh, like, is this one thing that you've always wanted in your life so much ever going to come to fruition? And then you start to get so nervous because of your age. And, it's already bad enough just going through anything that has to do with infertility. But then on top of it, when you add the realistic side of the fact that now you're 39, 40 years of age, I mean, that adds a whole other layer to it,
People with infertility often face this very dilemma. You reach a point of trauma and loss, and you want to stop, curl up somewhere, and just grieve. But you also know that the age of your eggs is so important. Any long delay could truly diminish your odds of success. But remember, for Gretchen and Slade, there wasn't really an infertility diagnosis. They only needed IVF as a workaround for Slade's vasectomy, so they still had another option readily available.
For my birthday, I was turning 38, and he said, for my birthday, he wrote a beautiful birthday card to me that just said, you've done so much for us to try and get pregnant. Now it's my turn, and I'm going to go get a reversal done, my vasectomy, and it's already scheduled for December 3rd. And it was initiating the next step. And so he went and did the reversal, and that was a 5.5-hour surgery, which was so intense and just so brave of him to go do that for us. And then sadly for 18 months we were trying, and we were not getting any results. And every time we went in and tested to see if there was any sperm, there was no sperm that was showing up. So then we went through a whole nother loss and difficult time of feeling like, we've lost our chances of having a child again. And now at this point, I'm 39 years of age. So the angst that started to happen within me just became more and more. And I just remember thinking, like, maybe this isn't meant for us. Maybe we're not going to have children. And so it was just really, it was devastating. It's like I feel like I had to go through 2 losses.
They felt like they were stuck. Slade's vasectomy reversal didn't take. So they were back to where they started, and serious doubt began to creep in.
I think that when I knew that it was bad for me going through the IVF was the moment that I actually started questioning Slade's and my relationship and wondering if I should stay in this relationship. And I knew at that moment, I was like, okay, this is bad. Like, I'm actually getting to the point where I'm questioning whether or not I should stay with this person that I'm deeply, madly in love with, because I so badly want to have a family and want to have children of my own.
Infertility can be one of the toughest things a person can go through, and it can do real damage to a relationship. I can't express how brave Gretchen is for sharing this aspect of her story with us. They had arrived in a very dark and confusing place. Gretchen did what so many of us do when we reach these seemingly insurmountable roadblocks in life. She called her mom.
When you always call your mom, and she's always the one that's like going to give you the real answer, like the real truth, the real thing. And you're like, okay, if mom says this, then it's what it needs to be. So I remember calling my mom, and it was in October. I said, am I making the right decision? Like, being with Slade, like, even if we can't have children, like, if we can't have biological children through IVF, is it okay? Like, is it smart to stay with this man? And I was so expecting my mom to say, no, I think it's time to move on. Like, I really was. And my mom said, no, honey. She said, absolutely not. She said, the love that you and Slade share is one of the most, special, unique relationships I've seen. And she said, and it doesn't matter whatever you guys are, whatever your past meant to be, whether it's adoption or having children of your own or not having children, the two of you together are going to figure that out. I'm thinking to myself, I'm in love with this man. I had to actually really realize and come to the conclusion that I was okay being with this person whether or not we had children together. And I think because I came to that conclusion, I think it allowed the space for us to be able to manifest and get to this next stage. I really think that was huge.
Gretchen wanted to become a mom, and it was her mom who helped give her the strength to take the next step. Gretchen and Slade were ready to go back to trying IVF. Only now, they had a very different mindset.
I felt really ready this time and really excited, and as hard as it was still going through these rounds, you have just such a different mindset. Like, you just feel like when I was doing the shots, instead of going, crap, 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 or saying a bad word, I would say, baby, 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 and I'd be focused on the baby. So it's just interesting how it really kind of changed everything that you were doing.
But it wasn't just their mindset that had changed. They also changed their doctor. They did a lot of research and found that Dr. Suri from Southern California Reproductive Center, and from earlier in this podcast, was the right fit for them. At Progeny, we help our patients find the right doctors every day. All of the clinics in our network are top of the line. But personal fit is a really important piece to the fertility puzzle. And given Gretchen and Slade's history with IVF, they wanted to be extra sure this time. We asked how they came to get an appointment, and fast, with Dr. Suri.
Oh, yeah, this is a great story.
Yeah, but it's so long, I can't do it. It's so long.
Can I do the short version?
It's the best story ever in the world,
It's the best story. But
I'm going to say no to the best story ever in the world.
He's going to say yes.
So they told us this story, and yes, it's an amazing story, but it's also too long for this podcast. Here's how it boils down.
So we giggle because you say the short version of how did we get to SCRC was we went through the magazine editor
got us to the publicist, who got us to the dentist, who happened to know the painter that connected us with the doctor.
We can't leave you hanging. As a special treat for our listeners, we will be releasing a bonus episode featuring the full story of how Gretchen and Slade got their really quick appointment with Dr. Suri. To hear it first, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. So they found their doctor, Dr. Suri, from SCRC, and they're going through treatment right now. At the time of this interview, they were in the process of fertilizing eggs in order to create embryos. Remember, Gretchen and Slade have a public voice, and this time around, now knowing how difficult this journey can really be, they've decided to use that voice to try to help others.
So, Slade and I decided to share our story publicly 4 years ago when we first did this journey, and we shared it through The Doctors, the TV show. But it was interesting because that round we were very naive and very clueless to all of this. And we were just excited. Like, we were like, oh, we're going to have a baby. That's going to be so much fun. And then when you kind of go through all that, you're like, oh my gosh, like, it was devastating and it was such a letdown, and you didn't realize you didn't have control over it as much as you thought you did. So this round, it was really important for me to share every step of the process, because I think that when we shared it on The Doctors, even though it was very real and raw, you didn't really get to see the day-to-day and the emotional stuff that you were going through at home with your partner. And so I literally filmed almost every second of what we were going through. Every time I was taking a shot, what I was feeling. I was doing a vlog every day. And I decided this time I wanted to share that, and I wanted to put it out there to show everybody, whether it be my closest friend or my parents or a complete stranger, the true, real emotions that a person goes through, and the pain and the sadness and the frustration and the anger and the happy moments and times that you're laughing and you're crying at the same time.
But challenges, confusion, difficulty, because we want people to understand that they're not alone in this process, that there is a community of people that are going through it, and as we've come to discover resources to simplify the process.
Infertility affects 1 in 8 couples. It is recognized as a disease by the World Health Organization. The technology and resources are out there for the people who need it, but it is still far too difficult for so many to access that care. We at Progeny are working hard to change the way fertility is covered by employers. The organization Resolve is making strides in helping to change the way we talk about infertility as a society. And brave people like Gretchen and Slade, and all of our guests, are using their voices to affect change. Gretchen and Slade are finding when you put this kind of personal truth out there, you get plenty of love and support back.
The outpour and the response from, my social media pages was overwhelming. I mean, truly overwhelming. I was so blessed that I have so many wonderful followers and fans and friends that reached out and just said, you're being so brave. Thank you for sharing your story. And so many people that are going through the same thing that said, thank you so much for showing what it's really like. Because I had some of my closest friends call me saying, I knew you were going through this, and I know you said you were taking 4 shots a day, but holy hell, I had no idea it was like this, you know? We just wanted to be really raw and just really vulnerable and show people that it's okay to cry, it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be, you know what, this hurts, or I feel bloated, or I feel ugly, or, you know, whatever it is that you are experiencing, it's okay to feel that way, and to have a conversation between partners of what each other could be doing to help each other, or, you know, how to get through it. So I had so many personal emails come to me too, literally where it's making me cry, because the emails that people would write me were just so sweet. Because as hard as it was to do that, especially as public figures, because you get judged immensely, I really feel like it's allowed a lot of people, because so many people's comments were telling their stories. And I think that it was almost like a sense of therapy for them to be able to just say it out loud and share it even on a public forum like that and say, me too, me too.
The couple is on a path to having a baby together. Along the way, they found a doctor. They found a community of love and support. They found a new purpose and use for their voice. And when they were lost and at their lowest point, they managed to find something they really had all along: each other. I think that one of the things that Gretchen and Slade's story show us is that sometimes it really takes perseverance to have a baby. Accidental pregnancies happen with such frequency that we sometimes lose sight of how inefficient human reproduction truly is. Today's technology is remarkable, and tomorrow's will be even better. But at the end of the day, we're talking about biology. It's never going to be 100%. And what this podcast is trying to make clear is that it isn't easy for anyone. No matter your mindset, or your income, or your family history, when you're faced with loss after loss after loss, it can become extremely difficult to keep going. It's not just pregnancy loss that can be traumatic. Losing embryos, receiving a tough diagnosis, or even just the feeling of loss every time you try and find that you aren't pregnant can make you want to just stop trying because it's too painful. This is why at Progeny, we don't just have a benefit that covers people the right way. We also offer genuine and personalized support to all of our members. Infertility is hard, and you shouldn't have to go it alone. I want to thank Gretchen Rossi and Slade Smiley for sharing their story with us. When public personas speak out on something this personal, they're opening themselves up to incredible scrutiny. They're also helping so many understand that they are not alone. I would also like to thank their doctor, Dr. Mark Suri of SCRC. Remember, you can find the hilarious story of how exactly Gretchen and Slade got to Dr. Suri at progeny.com/podcast. This is Infertility is brought to you by Progeny, Smarter Fertility Benefits. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to hear more, please subscribe and leave a rating and a review. They really help. If you have a fertility story you would like to share, or if you would like us to cover a fertility topic that interests you, please reach out. You can send us an email at thisisinfertility@progeny.com. Please remember, this podcast is not intended to substitute for the personalized expert advice of your physician. I'm Lissa Klein, and this is Infertility.